afternoon. This is Jane Tillman Irving.
And I'm George Flowers, welcoming you once again to our award-winning nationally syndicated radio drama series, Simon Studio Presents.
Today, from the Museum of Television and Radio in New York City, we present the world premiere of Sarah Levine Simon's Mousemusic, a family radio play for actors and orchestra.
Our play features the LaGuardia High School Chamber Players Orchestra, conducted by Alan Goldberg, along with actors Abigail Simon, Daniel Simon, Anne Fleming, and Sonia Evers.
Narrated by Roger Hendricks Simon, Mousemusic is produced by Mr. Simon and directed by Mr. Simon and Mr. Goldberg. Our associate producer is Robert Greer.
And now, Sarah Levine Simon's Mousemusic.
Schubert the mouse scraped the last drops of raspberry jam from the side of the jar and stirred it into his tea. It made a red cloud in the amber liquid. Then he helped himself to a square of chocolate from a faded china plate. He took a wee bite, followed by a sip of tea. The crevice left in the chocolate by his sharp front teeth reminded Schubert of a tiny cliff. And he hummed a cliff-climbing tune.
La 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 la.
As he took a second, even smaller bite. And then he followed it by a very deliberate sip of tea. Downstairs, a distant cello and violin tuned to the bright A of the piano.
Schubert, we can't wait for you any longer.
His sister Tazy and brother Pfeffer announced their cups were already empty.
Mother said when the maestro tunes, it's safe to go to the garden for peas and corn.
Aren't you coming, Schubert?
Chocolate and raspberry lingered pleasantly in Schubert's mouth.
I'll be along in a few minutes.
And Schubert took another sip of his tea and another tiny bite.
You'd better finish before Mother gets back.
And leave some chocolate for her. Mother has gone to the pantry to find cheese for our supper, and we need to do our share.
Then Pfeffer scurried off after his sister. Their mother had gone to the pantry to find cheese for their supper, and Schubert was now all alone. The musicians had begun to play, and the fullness of the cello filled the attic. And Schubert closed his eyes and listened. He loved music more than food and more than chocolate. He set down his cup of tea, and then he twirled and danced across the rough flooring to where the long planks were shaded by the angled roof of the attic. A persistent leak had caused the wood to buckle and left a space in the floor just wide enough to allow a mouse to peer through into the living room below. And at every chance, Schubert listened from his tiny perch in the rafters of the maestro's great house. And when his mother went to the pantry, Schubert crept through the little hole in the floor and over onto a high shelf where the maestro kept his music and busts of Beethoven, Brahms, Bach, and the other Schubert. Today, the maestro was dressed in jeans, a t-shirt with a little melody printed on it, and his tennis shoes. He conducted with one hand and he played with the other. A cellist and a violinist, dressed just as casually, followed his baton. Sometimes they played together and sometimes alone with the maestro's accompaniment. The music swelled Schubert's tiny body, notes danced before his eyes, and when the maestro stopped, please, now let's take it over again from number 42. Thank you.
I can still hear the music in my head.
And at 5 o'clock, the maestro's manager came into the living room.
Maestro, you have a concert to play this evening.
Oh, no. Oh, dear. I had nearly forgotten. The maestro set down his baton. The violinist and the cellist put their instruments away in the velvet-lined cases and gathered their music. All right, I'll see you all at 7:30 sharp. The maestro called as the players left through the massive front door. Schubert watched as the maestro went upstairs to dress. Then he squeezed back through the hole in the ceiling. Particles of dust swirled in a slender beam of light as daylight faded. Without music, the bare attic seemed empty and bleak.
How grand the concert hall must be. If only I could go and watch the maestro conduct his orchestra. Oh, to see the maestro wear the coat and tails he keeps in his bedroom closet. The very coat and tails maestro wears in the pictures of the orchestra.
And a sad little melody lingered in Schubert's head. Keeping time to it, Schubert drew triangles and bows in the air, and as he conducted, he danced, and he danced, and he danced so fast that he danced right into his mother, who had just returned from the pantry with some cheese.
Schubert,
She stood there all prim and proper.
you were supposed to help Daisy and Pfeffer gather peas and corn from the maestro's garden.
But Mother...
Instead, selfish, foolish mouse, you are swirling and dancing to your silly music.
But...
Go quickly. It's almost 7 o'clock. There won't be enough for us to eat.
Well, all right.
Schubert hurried out of the attic. He slid down the water pipe, fireman style, and landed in the maestro's clean, bright kitchen. He could hear the maestro muttering and humming as he dressed. A long hallway led to the front door, and concert posters covered the walls. The maestro's large leather case sat empty by the door. Soon the maestro appeared on the stairs, dressed in his tails and cummerbund, and gathered his fat leather music scores from the piano. As he put them into the case, his manager knocked on the door.
Maestro, the car is ready.
She looked down at the maestro's feet.
Oh, dear, you are still wearing your tennis shoes, and they make the cuffs of your pants seem a trifle long.
I must go and change my shoes. The patents, yes, they'll do. I should think they'll do. All right, I'll be right back. And the maestro hurried back upstairs. When he rounded the bend and his manager was busily powdering her nose in the hall mirror, it occurred to Schubert,
I could ride to the concert in the maestro's leather case.
without thinking that his mother might worry, the fat little mouse climbed into the maestro's leather case and found a special little mouse nook for himself between the spine of the elegant leather score and the well-worn leather cover.
No one will ever know.
And just to make sure, he took one last peek, and he saw the maestro returning wearing shiny patent leather shoes. The maestro closed the case and picked it up, and Schubert swayed to and fro in the darkness. The maestro and the manager followed the stone path leading from the front door to a waiting car, and off they drove to the concert hall together.
Good evening, Maestro.
Schubert heard a voice say. The car had come to a halt. It was the guard at the stage door of the concert hall. The guard's voice was drowned out by the clamor of voices.
Please sign his autograph.
May I have your autograph, sir? Autograph, please. Autograph.
Anything else? Just sign this, please.
They were the autograph seekers.
Just sign this.
Papers rustled,
Sign this autograph.
and people pushed and shouted and shoved against the maestro in his case. They squeezed poor little Schubert so hard inside the case.
I can hardly breathe. It's so dusty in here. I even might sneeze.
Oh, and sneeze he did. He sneezed, and fortunately no one heard the untimely mouse sneeze because a stern-voiced guard tried to herd everyone away.
No more, the maestro must prepare.
But you didn't sign my program,
Cried the voice of a child. And to Schubert's relief, it was the last autograph signed by the maestro. But then, doors slammed, and a new voice took command.
Would you like me to carry that, sir?
Oh, Schubert felt a sudden thrust forward and a slight drop downward. Whoever now held the case walked at a swift pace. He could hear the lumbering maestro's footsteps fade down a long corridor. Another door screeched open, and Schubert heard the sound of instruments tuning. Many, many instruments. Some instruments were deep, robust, and resonant. Other instruments reminded Schubert of little birds, geese, and wind rustling through leaves and howling through eaves. Then someone set the maestro's case down.
Ouch!
And opened it. Schubert rubbed his eyes as he adjusted to the bright lights. He peeked out. Just then a giant hand wiped a giant mustache and a nose, sniffed. And then a pair of giant hands lifted the scores and Schubert to a podium atop a block of wood. The podium stood in front of a great orchestra on a great stage, in a great hall, filled with velvet seats and many doors. And you could hear the audience as they came in, rustling. They poured into the hall through the doors, talking among themselves. And ushers carrying flashlights showed them where to sit. When all the seats were taken, someone dimmed the lights. A hush filled the hall, and the stage lights began to glow. Schubert held his breath. From the right side of the stage, the maestro came forward. The people seated to the left saw him first and began to applaud. When the entire audience saw him, the applause swelled to a roar. The maestro walked to the center of the stage in front of the podium and bowed first to the audience and then to the orchestra. When the clapping stopped, Maestro raised his baton. On the downbeat, the violins played. Schubert peeked sideways to see the flutist raise the flute to her mouth and play. He pointed his paw toward the French horn player, invited him to play. He crept forward to see the clarinet player join in with the flute. The French horn and bass violin entered in a loud, forceful style. Then, as things quieted down, Schubert pointed again toward the French horn and then the violas. The principal cellist raised her bow and played the little solo she had rehearsed with the maestro that very afternoon. And Schubert, excited by the glorious music, left the cover of the maestro's music. He waved his paws in time to the music, and when it was time for the concert mistress to join in, Schubert nodded at the appropriate moment. He nodded to the clarinet and kettle drum players. But before he could signal the trumpet player, a bow lifted Schubert high into the air above the podium. The second violinist had put down his violin.
The orchestra!
Cried a little boy in the front row.
A mouse?
An elderly woman with peacock feathers in her hat sat directly in front of the maestro's podium. She tilted her head sideways to see. The feathers tickled the little boy's nose and he sneezed.
Achoo!
A mouse in the house? You must be allergic to mice.
His mother handed him a tissue. The maestro continued to conduct, but the assistant concertmaster shook his bow, causing Schubert to leap forward. He landed into the wide brass mouth of the French horn. The shiny metal was slippery, and every time Schubert crawled close to the top, he slipped in downward circles back into the instrument's neck. Schubert was trapped. The French horn couldn't make a sound. The maestro waved his baton impatiently and cleared his throat. The horn player's face was puffed and red. He blew harder and harder until, with a loud blast, he ejected the poor mouse onto a kettle drum tuned in D. On the kettle drum, Schubert bounced and bounced. And with each bounce of the kettle drum, the sound rang fuller. Now the maestro was furious. The sounds the orchestra played were not the sounds written in the music at all. He stomped on the podium, and he waved his baton at the timpanist. The confused timpanist brought his mallet down hard onto the top of the drum and made Schubert bounce right up onto the crown of the bass. Oh dear, screamed the bassist in the middle of her passage. The lights, the stage lights, glared now into Schubert's face. The orchestra had stopped playing. The audience hushed. Not knowing what else to do, Schubert raised his paw. And then the clarinet, flute, and French horn players played first. When the cellos heard them play, they frantically turned the pages of their music and they started playing. Suddenly, the violins and violas joined in. Now the maestro raised his baton, and when the entire orchestra played once again, Schubert scurried down the neck of the bass violin and across the floor, where he found a safe place to hide in the plush green case lining of a piccolo case. After the symphony's final cadence, skirts and music rustled. Tails swished as the entire orchestra looked around for Schubert.
Where's that mouse?
There!
Oh, there!
Hey, get that mouse! Get him! Then the little boy in the front row cried,
Mouse music! I want more mouse music!
Mouse music! We want more mouse music! Mouse music! The audience and then the orchestra joined the little boy in clapping and demanding more mouse music! Mouse music! Mouse music! Mouse music! The orchestra and the audience clapped. If I catch that mouse, said the maestro. But Schubert was nowhere to be seen as the audience joined in with mouse music, mouse music. He had scurried back into the dimly lit wings of the great concert hall to look for the maestro's case.
My poor mother must be so worried, and I am so hungry and tired. Oh, for some corn and peas from the maestro's garden. How will I ever get back home?
He shook his head sadly.
I must get back the way I came. I must find the maestro's dressing room. Yes, that's where they must have taken his case. And what if they leave without me?
And the audience applauded as the maestro came back.
Try
Schubert scurried along faster and faster.
Dressing room B.
Read a sign on a metal door.
And C and D and E and F.
A great staircase led up to G, H, I, and J. Schubert was lost in a maze of stairs and corridors, and on L, M, N, O, and P, the orchestra could scarcely be heard. The corridor was painted a faded gray, and a mop and bucket stood on the landing.
A famous maestro wouldn't dress way up here.
And Schubert scurried across the corridor and down another staircase, where he found himself in a long, curving hallway, carpeted in plush red. Red velvet curtains covered a row of doorways. These were the special boxes for special listeners. Schubert peeked inside the first one, and in it sat two gentlemen dressed in tuxedos. He peeked into the second. It was the president. In the third sat two mean and three elegantly dressed women. One was wearing a red cape Schubert recognized. She was the maestro's manager. She leaned forward over the gold railing to listen to the orchestra, and she didn't notice when Schubert crept into her pocket of the cape as it flowed and draped over the seat next to her. Schubert heaved a sigh of relief as he nestled and snuggled against the plush satiny lining. And during the applause of the audience, the manager brought him to the maestro's dressing room. While the maestro's dressing room and the maestro relaxed, the maestro once again signed autographs. Schubert slipped out of the cape pocket and into the maestro's case. Schubert had a warm ride home that night. He waited in the case until the lights were dim. Then he climbed out and he ran upstairs as fast as he could to his frantic mother.
I'm sorry I made you worry, Mother.
His mother was too relieved to scold him.
Oh, Schubert, you must be so hungry.
That night, the attic seemed warmer and brighter. Tazy and Pfeffer hugged and danced merry circles around Schubert.
Schubert, here is a nice warm bowl of corn and pea soup.
And Schubert swirled the bits of corn and peas in circles, and then he began to conduct them. And when Schubert finished his soup, his mother held him tightly and kissed him many, many times. Then she kissed Tazy and Pfeffer, and she tucked the three of them into bed.
Good night, Mother. Good night, Mother.
Good night, Mother.
Schubert dreamed about a mouse orchestra. It had 100 players clad in coats with mouse tails. Schubert conducted a symphony of his own. When he was finished, the audience applauded. And applauded. Mouse music! Mouse music! More mouse music! Mouse music! Mouse music! More mouse music! Demanded the orchestra and the audience. Bravo! And Schubert took many bows. Then he made the orchestra play a little encore. You know, if Schubert hadn't been a mouse, there would have been two Schuberts.
From the Museum of Television and Radio in New York City, you have been listening to the world premiere of Sarah Levine Simon's Mousemusic, a family radio play for actors and orchestra. It is another in our award-winning nationally syndicated radio drama series, Simon Studio Presents.
Our play featured the LaGuardia High School Chamber Players Orchestra, conducted by Alan Goldberg, along with actors Abigail Simon, Daniel Simon, Anne Fleming, and Sonia Evers. Narrated by Roger Hendrick Simon, Mousemusic was produced by Mr. Simon and directed by Mr. Simon and Mr. Goldberg. Our associate producer was Robert Greer, with special thanks to Chris Catanese of the Museum of Television and Radio. Thank you for listening. I'm George Flowers.
And I'm Jane Tillman Irving for Simon Studio Presents.
This is Roger Hendrick Simon, with special thanks to Jeff Ward of Union Signal. If you enjoyed Mousemusic, you can purchase your own personal copy as well as inquire about our other shows. Just call us at 212-841-0204. That's 212-841-0204, or you can write Simon Studio Presents, Post Office Box 873, Ansonia Station, New York, New York 10023. And now, until next time, so long, everybody.